It's louder than I thought. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City Council regular business meeting for October 26th, 2023. I'm Deputy Mayor French. Mayor Johnson is not feeling well this night, so I'm substituting for him. And tonight we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Councilmember Riddle has graciously offered to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Riddle. Do I hear a motion for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Any discussion? Hearing no conversation, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you, everybody. Right now we have two proclamations, excuse me. One is recognizing and honoring Veterans Day, and then we'll move on to October Freedom to Read Month. I'll read the first one here. Whereas Veterans Day is observed nationally on November 11 as a legal public holiday to honor and thank all veterans who served in the armed forces in wartime or peacetime. And whereas Veterans Day was originally known as Armistice Day, which signified the signing of the armistice on November 11th, 1918, ending the First World War. And whereas President Dwight D. Eisenhower proclaimed in 1954 that Armistice Days would be known as Veterans Day and would solemnly remember the sacrifices of those who fought so valiantly on the seas and the air, on the foreign shores to preserve our heritage of freedom. And whereas President Eisenhower further proclaimed that Veterans Day presents all citizens with the opportunity to reconsecrate ourselves to the task of promoting and enduring peace, that so that their efforts shall not have been in vain. Now, therefore, the mayor and the city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim November 11th, the legal commemoration of, and Friday, November 10th, observed as Veterans Day 2023, and encourage all citizens of the city of Lake Forest Park to acknowledge and to thank those who have served our country in the armed forces. Signed this 28th day of October 2023. And that is an important recognition. All right, do we have any veterans in the room tonight? If they are here, I would love for them to stand up.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
I just would like to say that we do have veterans on our staff.
We do.
So I'd like to express our appreciation for the veterans who serve on our staff.
Thank you, Councilmember Bodie. Thank you all. And with that, we'll move on to Councilmember Furutani is going to read October as Freedom to Read Month.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. All right, so this one is a little bit longer. Whereas the American Library Association's Banned Books Week celebrates the freedom to read as observed each year as a reminder to Americans not to take their freedom for granted. And whereas the freedom to read is essential to our democracy and reading is among our greatest freedoms. And whereas privacy is essential to the exercise of that freedom, and the right to privacy is the right to open inquiry without having the subject of one's interest judged, examined, or scrutinized by others. And whereas the freedom to read is protected by our Constitution and the intellectual freedom is essential to the preservation of a free society and a creative culture. And whereas all library books and resources should be accessible for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people of the community the library serves. And whereas no books or resource materials should be excluded or censored because of their origin, background, or views of those contributing to their creation, no matter how controversial the topic, such as culture, religion, love, war, science, and technology, to name a few. And whereas libraries should challenge censorship in fulfillment of their responsibility to provide free access of all expressions of ideas and information. And whereas conformity limits the range and variety of inquiry and expression on which our democracy and culture depend. And whereas the American Library Association's Office of Intellectual Freedom has found a dramatic increase in book challenges in the last several years, with 2022 having the highest number since ALA started collecting censorship data 20 years ago, with 1,269 books, almost doubling 2021's total with 729. And Whereas currently, most of the attempts to remove library materials are on the topics of LGBTQIA plus issues, books by Black authors, and books that document the experience of BIPOC people. And whereas most of the book challenges happen in public libraries, 48%, and with school libraries running close behind at 41%, schools at 10%, and higher education libraries and other institutions at 1%. And whereas some individuals, groups, and public authorities work to remove or limit access to reading materials, to censor content in schools, to label controversial views, to distribute lists of objectionable books or authors, and to purge libraries of materials reflecting the diversity of society. And whereas community members can show support and celebrate the freedom to read by visiting the American Library Association's website, where one can find the top 10 list of 2022 challenged books and statement on book censorship. And now, therefore, the mayor and city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim the month of October as Freedom to Read Month, and encourage all citizens of the city of Lake Forest Park to learn more about book censorship and support people's right to read on all perspectives without restriction. Signed this 28th day of October, 2023.
Thank you, Councilmember Furutani. That is a very important proclamation, as was the former one. My late father was an Air Force pilot and also a prolific author. So I know he's here with us in spirit, so to speak. He'd be very supportive of these proclamations. Okay, we're going to move on to citizen comments. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make citizen comments at this time? Hi, Chief. How are you? Good. Thanks, sir. Okay. Natalie Pascal Boiswell. It's very nice to see you, Natalie.
Good evening. My name is Nathalie Pascal Boisseau, and I live at 18952 40th Place Northeast in Lake Forest Park. And you already got a package from myself, my spouse, and a few neighbors, letters and signatures to bring to your attention and escalate at the same time the topic of safety and slowing down the traffic, both on 40th Place and on 45th Place Northeast. That's the intersection that opens to the 5-acre woods. An accident in September has catalyzed us to really come together and write those letters and different suggestions and solution. A young man ran off the road with his vehicle and ran into the tree in front of the house of a young couple with a child. No one was hurt except the young man, which is still, we don't have access to the police report exactly the cause, but we have noticed that the speed has increased a lot in the last few years. I have 2 dogs. I walk them twice a day. And now I have to be ready to jump in the ditch. And I did jump in the ditch twice in the last 2 weeks. Cars do not slow down. They swerve at the last minute, but those 2 times I jumped, they weren't swerving. They were going for me. There are elders who like to walk. There's parents with strollers, other dog walkers. It just doesn't feel relaxing at all. People barely make the stop at 40th. And then when we try to cross at the crosswalk to go in 5-acre woods, we don't see the oncoming traffic from one direction. So we have to be ready to run to cross. And then the drivers rarely stop to let us cross. So at the last minute, we just expect that we have to wait and try to have the clear way to go. So we think there's many measures that can be done, some transitional, not necessarily expensive, speed bumps, ramble strips, a sign indicating what the speed limit should be on our narrow little road of 45th, a panel telling what is actually the current speed when people speed by, activates a red light for the crosswalk, and so on. So I will give this copy to Chief. So there's also to bring attention to maybe monitoring those 2 roads. And I want to mention that 40th has become a heavy with not local traffic, but with traffic coming to avoid taking 104 Ballinger Way. So it's sort of a shortcut for people. And we would really like a follow-up. So I'll be a liaison, and that's why you have a separate letter with my contact info. And I realize I'm not the only one tonight to speak to that topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Is there, is there anyone in the council chambers that would like to make public comment at this time? With that, we can move on to anybody online.
If you wish to address the council, please use the raise hand function.
So
I don't think so, Mr.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
with that, we'll close public comment. Thank you, Natalie. That's a very important topic. And something the council has been working very hard on. Thank you so much for the letters. This is really important work. Let's see, we are on to, well, we have about 4 minutes or 3 minutes. Are your friends here? You're ready? Okay, well, let's go on to our presentation and on topic. This is wonderful. A petition requesting lower speed limits on 53rd Avenue Northeast and Northeast 185th Street from Tejus. And our friend here has done an excellent job of putting an online survey together. And thank you so much for coming to us tonight. Please.
Hi, my name is Tejus Bhasin and I live in Lake Forest Park. I'm 10 years old and I'm here today to address a major problem on 4 streets in Lake Forest Park. But first, let me introduce you to Ayan Vachu. Ayan is my mom's best friend's son. Ayan is 10 years old like me and he lives in a residential neighborhood in North Carolina. He loves to paint and draw cards. He is also friendly, likes drawing, and loves riding his scooter in his neighborhood. But he died on the 30th of May this year. He was riding his scooter after lunch and a speeding car hit him. We need to make sure this doesn't happen in Lake Forest Park. The 4 streets are 53rd Avenue Northeast, Northeast 187th Street, and Northeast 188th Street. My neighbors, my friends, my family, and I walk on those streets daily for exercise and fun. But how do we, the people, walk on those streets if cars drive at very high speeds? And when my mom and I walk on those streets, my dad is scared. I've also been able to share this problem with my neighbors through the online petition that I created. 86 of our neighbors have signed this petition till now to support the cause. And when people sign it, they also sign on behalf of their families. And they all agree to the problem I've explained earlier. You can see some of the neighbors in the audience today. Thank you to them for coming. A solution for this problem could be speed bumps or speed cameras around the neighborhood and loop. My neighbors and I would prefer speed bumps and speed limit reduction to 15 miles per hour, as they will reduce the speeding problem immediately for us. Speed cameras may also be a good solution too, but they may be expensive and they may cause change slower. Now I would like to invite 2 more parents from my neighborhood who also want to contribute and share their experiences. Thank you for coming today and supporting me, and I hope that we can find a solution to this problem together.
Thank you very much, Tejus. That's great.
Thank you.
Very well done. Of course. Please, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Lake Forest Park City Council. I appreciate you giving me part of your time tonight. I'll do my best to keep it short. I do have a toddler in the hallway that I'm trying to get home to bed. My name is Heather Yasmin. I have been an LFP resident since 2020. We moved here for my husband's pediatric training at Seattle Children's, where he's now a physician. Since moving to the area and buying our home on 187th Street, and that's between 50th and 53rd, kind of on the top of that hill there, our family has grown to include my son, Calvin, who's turning 2 next week. While we have really fallen in love with this community, we have always felt that there's an issue with speeding on 187th and more broadly in that neighborhood. And And this really took on new meaning as became parents, and more so as Calvin has become more mobile. Currently, my son is too young to teach him to stay away from the road, but even a child of a teachable age is given really no margin for error should they have a lapse in judgment and wander out into the street. We have witnessed speeds that we feel have been well over 50 miles per hour. That speed combined with literally no shoulder or sidewalk and many areas of very limited visibility, it is incredibly dangerous. The offenders are both commercial and residential drivers. We also feel quite certain that this hill is often used in the area to hot rod their fast cars around fun corners and hills, which coming from a family who likes fast cars, I do understand the appeal. However, it's very inappropriate given the area. And a lot of these are repeat offenders that we know live in this neighborhood as well. We've attempted to signal to those individuals to please slow down and have been met with rude hand gestures and rude faces and have been met with purposeful revving of their engines outside of our home. We have put out caution and slow down signs, but this doesn't seem to make a difference. It is my proposal that in addition to the suggestions provided by my fellow community members, that speed bumps be placed at appropriate intervals along 187th. We're coming to you now with the hope that these changes can be put in place before someone in the community is hurt. I work from home full time and my office window faces 187th. All day I see how many people attempt to use this road for walking, biking, pushing strollers, and the many kids walking to school, to the school bus stops, to the friends' houses, and the Aqua Club. Well, I know I've not lived here that long. Everything about LFP screams family and welcome and community, and not doing anything about this issue contradicts everything that I feel this community stands for. I've reached out to the council previously and had prompt replies from the sheriff's office and one of the council members here today, and was essentially told that we will add it to the list of speeding issues for the area. I just don't feel that that's good enough. We need action to be taken and swiftly. For a young child to feel the need to come to speak before you tonight, that should speak volumes to the situation. It's pretty crucial. Tejus, thank you so much for coming and being so strong and brave, and speaking on behalf of all of us and our kids tonight. You're making this whole community and your parents so proud. I hope that assembling here tonight and speaking to you directly this evening shows you all how much this means to us, and we're looking forward to seeing some action taken on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Sure appreciate the comments. Was there one more individual that wanted to speak on behalf of the Tejus? Of course, you may. It's your presentation. Evening.
Good evening. My name is Eero Vertiainen. I live on the 50th Avenue. Actually, you can see Tejus from our backyard and where they live. I was supposed to come here with the whole family, but we have little children who need to go to bed. But I think that we're all talking about the same issue over here. We're worried about our children. So we've been residents of Lake Forest Park since 2019. We lived in Fremont, right on 39th Avenue. Very bad. We had dogs at the time, no kids. So we felt that, we wanted to have a safe neighborhood. We wanted to have somewhere where we could actually walk. We didn't have to worry about anything over here when we moved. Well, actually, when we saw the place, and then once we moved. But now we have children. Our 3-year-old is very active. He loves to run. Actually, here's one of his friends. They love to run around 50th Avenue. They love to run around 188th. I've seen friends go with their bikes. They go super fast. But now we have an issue. We have more and more delivery trucks. We have more and more people living in the neighborhood and speeding through the neighborhood. I would say that 187th is probably the worst in terms of being a cut through. But we've also started to see more and more people come to 50th, 188th, and the other streets that were mentioned in Tejus's presentation. And we don't have sidewalks. My wife actually said that she feels like our neighborhood is frozen in time. We can walk. Everybody knows everyone. We love the neighborhood. We love this city that we live in. And we would like to make sure that it stays safe. It only takes one accident. Somebody doesn't pay attention. So I recommend that the city council takes action, installing speed bumps, reducing the speed limit to 50 miles per hour. If we can get speed cameras, that'll be even better. But I know that, like Tejus said, it is very expensive. So with that said, I really appreciate the couple of minutes that I've had. Tejus, want to thank you for your presentation and for the initiative. I want to thank everybody else who showed up over here today, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay. Could you step up to the microphone, Tejus, please? Then we can hear you a little better. Thank you.
In the pamphlet, there's also a few pictures on the speed lines, which are trying to stop the speed and make bumps, but they aren't really working. So they're pictures, and I would also like to invite Mr. Austin and Mrs. Cicero.
Okay. Right.
He's excited to be here. Hi, I'm Diane Cicero. I'm a neighbor of Tejus, and my son and him are good friends. We moved to Lake Forest Park from Seattle in 2019. We've been good neighbors with the Bhasins since then as well. And so our two boys have become great friends, and we've loved the neighborhood and how much they can go out and play in our neighborhood. But that street, 187th, has been a street where we say you can go walk, you can go to the end of the driveway, but you cannot go to 187th. And it's not just the speed of the cars on that hill, but it's also the curves. There's a lot of the way the cars can come up onto that road. You can't really see around the corner. I've gone running plenty of times on that road, and I think about it twice as I turn my audio down when I'm running with my headphones, because I don't know how fast cars are going to be coming down that road. So it is a huge family neighborhood. It keeps growing. I see lots and lots of littles out there. It used to be ours that were the littles, but now I see so many of what you see here, and they're just very interested in keeping it safe. And I'm very proud of Tejus of speaking up and bringing this to our attention. So yeah, I think we can do something. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you very much. Anybody else from the group that would like to contribute tonight?
That concludes my presentation.
Well, Tejus, you did very well. Thank you. Very well. Well, thank you all for coming, and particularly for bringing this to our attention. As you may know, this council has worked very hard over the last, almost 2 years to try to change some laws and try to make some improvements. And we all recognize that there is a definitive need out there on our roadways. As a father of a 7.5-year-old, I see it on a daily basis walking my daughter to school, and I'm the person out there waving at people and trying to get them to slow down, sometimes with the unfortunate gestures in return. And I think it's really time this community has a much bigger, robust conversation about what our needs are and look at safety in the aggregate. I just drove down from 160th, coming back from Kellogg for my daughter's soccer practice. And that, unfortunately, that was a location of a tragic pedestrian accident a number of years ago, and that's one too many. And I know we're all committed to making the best difference we possibly can, and we look forward to having conversations with you all in the very near future. And Tejus, I have to say, at 10 years old, that is a very impressive young man. So please come back and visit us again, and maybe we'll find a job for you here. Thank you again. Okay, with that, we need to move on to our legislative. I'm sorry. Yes, of course you may. Of course.
And
Sorry.
I really do appreciate all of you coming and holding us accountable for performing actions. And one of the things that the folks over here on your right are the city staff, and they've heard your comments as well. So, come back in a month, come back in a couple of months if you don't see any action happening, and see what the update is. I really do encourage you to keep coming back and pestering us. We don't think it's pestering, it's keeping us honest. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Goldman.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I decided to keep a road journal where just all the incidents that happen as I'm walking to the bus stop, walking my dog. And I found that in my neck of the woods, there's about once every 5 days when someone just didn't yield, whether it was at a crosswalk or a stop sign or making a right on red. So it's a big problem. And I think we do need to take action. And so I want to give you a bit of a preview, and I hope I'm not speaking too much out of turn. Last year, we adopted guidelines for how we should set speed limits. Oh, sorry, can you not hear me? Get closer. Last year, we adopted some guidelines, and we're in the process of doing a study of all the local roads in our city. And there is basically a flow chart that says, like, if the road does or doesn't have sidewalks and it has this many driveways, and it's a very holistic approach to setting speed limits. And in my personal opinion, if there's no sidewalks on the road, 20 should be the absolute maximum speed limit, and maybe even less. So at least I will be pushing very heavily that once we get that report finalized, that we use that report and we make some wholesale changes to the speed limits in our city. And I hope my fellow council members will be joining me on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Goldman. I think we will be. Colleagues, any other thoughts on topic? Thank you both for your comments. And the study that the methodology that Mr. Goldman referred to is called NACDO City Limits, I believe. I don't know if it's on our website or not, but it's a document that's out there, and we were the first city in the country to adopt it. It's a really important, and it gets away from, it's an important piece of engineering documentation, so to speak, and it is really important because it gets away from standard sort of formulaic speed setting methodologies. And it's it really, with all the diverse roads we have in this community, it's essential that we do treat things differently. So thank you again for coming. Mr. Lebo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor French. May we have an opportunity at a council meeting coming up to get an update on the study?
Yes, we absolutely can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lebo. Good reminder. Okay. Any other comments, thoughts, questions? Thank you again. Okay, we brought Ms. Helder up here, but we'll start again. We're going to be moving on to the presentation on the revised 2023-2024 legislative agenda. And we have Shelley Helder joining us virtually. Thank you, Shelley. How are you tonight?
Good evening. I am well. Can you hear me and see the presentation?
We can hear you. Yes, thank you.
Great. Well, it is good to be with you this evening. I am Shelley Helder, and I have the privilege of serving the city as your state lobbyist. And I'm pleased to be joining you virtually tonight to talk about the city's preparation for the 2024 state legislative session. So this evening, I'm going to provide an overview of what we expect from the 2024 session. I'll review the city's draft legislative agenda, and then I'll wrap up by talking about some next steps. Since it's a little difficult for me to see you all with my screen shared, I'll complete the presentation and then look forward to your comments, questions, or feedback on whether these priorities are correct, and any other comments that you may have. So the 2024 session will be a short 60-day session. It's the second of the biennium. The legislature's primary objective is to adopt supplemental operating, capital, and transportation budgets. The supplemental budgets are designed to make just small changes to the existing biennial budgets, mostly to account for changes in revenue projections and caseload forecasts. On the operating budget, the most recent forecast shows that the state has roughly 900 million more than was anticipated when the current budget was adopted. So that's always good news when you have more money than you were expecting. The contrast is the case for the transportation budget. The transportation projects around the state are coming in higher than they were estimated, and higher than they received funding for within the current budget. So legislators will have to figure out how to manage those costs and which projects will proceed forward and which may need to be delayed due to lack of cash. Just for some context, WashDOT is estimating that some of the bigger projects in the state are coming in upwards of 30% more than what was appropriated by the legislature. And then the third budget, the capital budget, has roughly 95 million in remaining bonding capacity. So it will be a much smaller budget than the biennial budget that we have in odd numbered years. On the policy side, every bill that was introduced in the 2023 session that did not pass will be automatically reintroduced. And legislators can, of course, introduce new bills as well. Politically, Democrats are still going to hold strong majorities in both chambers. And for every member in the House and half of the Senate, they will be up for re-election in November 2024. So campaigns will be on their mind, though, of course, there is a campaign freeze during the legislative session. For the most part, committee assignments and committee chairs will remain the same as they were in the first year of the biennium. The one exception that I will note is former Senator Christine Rolfes, who was the chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee and the lead operating budget writer in the Senate. She resigned from her position and to take an appointment to the Kitsap County Commission. Her replacement as the lead operating budget writer is Senator June Robinson from Everett. And so that is a pretty significant change in budget leadership for the legislature. Some of the major themes or policies that we expect to see discussed are really similar to what we've seen in years past. Housing policy, of course, is remaining at the forefront. 2023 was described as the year of housing, not only because of the policies that were passed, but also because of the major investments in affordable housing. I do know that there's going to be a big push for a dedicated revenue source for more affordable housing. Similarly, the legislature passed over a dozen bills directing changes in local land use and development regulations with the intent of prompting development of more housing. And some legislators and stakeholders have identified some technical issues that they plan to resolve in what's referred to as trailer bills. Also expect there to be a really robust discussion on transit-oriented development and lot splitting. Those are two bills that were heavily discussed last year, and we do expect to return. Another area of focus will be the Climate Commitment Act, which is Washington's version of a cap and invest program. It auctions greenhouse gas emissions allowances, and in just the first few auctions, it has generated substantially more revenue than was anticipated. So the legislature will consider policy changes to limit that revenue collection moving forward, as well as allocation of the unanticipated revenue. Their legislatures also likely to continue the ongoing discussions on public safety, with what's expected to be a focus on law enforcement officer recruitment and retention. And finally, the new Senate Ways and Means Chair, June Robinson, has said that the biggest fiscal challenge that she sees facing the state is the state's behavioral health system, which I will speak to in a little bit more in just a few moments. So it is going to be a short session, but it is already shaping up to be very busy. And because there are so many issues that come across legislators' desks, the city develops a legislative agenda, and that lists the top issues that we'd like to see our state legislators tackle. So the priorities are typically adopted to align with the state's biennium. So the current city legislative agenda is for the 23-24 biennium. And then midway through the biennium, which is where we are today, the council adopts minor changes to the agenda to reflect what was accomplished in the first year. So the draft legislative agenda that's included in your packet has the priorities that are being recommended for the council's consideration, which were developed by the Legislative Steering Committee. So with all of that context in mind, let's review the draft priorities, which are mostly all carryover with some modifications. So the first priority has been a city priority for many years. It's addressing the fish barriers along Lion Creek. This past session, we were successful in securing $1.8 million for the city's barrier along Lion Creek near State Route 104. And this is really a major accomplishment since capital budget writers prefer to fund fish barrier projects through their designated grant program, which we've historically been unfavorably ranked for. So we really stood no chance of getting money through that grant program. But we were successful getting it in partnership with our state delegation. We don't have a new funding request for the second year of the biennium, but we are keeping this item on the agenda to continue to talk about the importance of funding for city-owned barriers upstream of the SR 104 culvert, which is now fully funded. The second priority is an item that was not accomplished last year. We had a threefold request for investments along State Route 104 and focused primarily on the funding gap of 1.2 million for the roundabout on SR 104. We also asked the legislature to prioritize maintenance and incorporate complete street principles along the corridor. And in short, we are maintaining this as a priority for the second year of the biennium. Since it is not a budget year, and we know that the transportation budget is already in a deficit, I do want to be honest and say I think it's unlikely that we will secure the full amount, but the 1.2 million is the amount that's needed. And if we don't ask, we definitely won't receive anything. So that's the reason for that item being included at that level, despite it being a supplemental budget year. The third priority highlights the broader financial challenges the city is facing as a result of the 1% property tax cap, rising insurance rates, and inflation, among many other things. And some of you may recall that there was a really big push to get the 1% property tax cap adjustment over the finish line in the final weeks of the 2023 session. And that obviously failed, but the coalition is reconvening, and despite being told that an election year is not the time to make this change, I do know that there will be a concerted effort in 2024. The final draft priority is the one that is most significantly modified from the prior version of the city's legislative agenda. Last year, there was a priority in coordination with the other racer cities. The Lake Forest Park wanted to secure funding for the Crisis Response Center. Ultimately, that project was funded through grant programs, which was a success. But in light of that being fully funded and of that investment, and I think really mostly in response to the needs of the community and the region and the state, we're proposing to ask the legislature to focus their attention on long-term funding needs for co-responder services, crisis stabilization centers in all areas of the state, not just King County, and facilities that can serve individuals who need care beyond the length of time that they can stay in a crisis center. And so that's kind of what's captured in that fourth priority of the behavioral health care system needs statewide. So these are the four draft priorities developed by the Legislative Steering Committee. In addition to the top priorities, we also list targeted policy areas that we anticipate will arise during the session that will have a significant impact on city governance. The two statements that have been on the agenda are regarding city tools and resources and recyclable materials and solid waste. Under the city tools and resources section, we incorporated language that clarifies the desire for more city tools and resources for incentives or really to incentivize development of affordable housing at the 30 to 50% AMI. Really, it's that level of affordable housing that just doesn't pencil without public support. And then the two other items that I just want to flag for your awareness are two topics that are being prioritized by city partners. The first is the Association of Washington Cities priority of asking the legislature to help recruit and retain police officers for public safety. And specifically, AWC will be pursuing an update to the existing local option public safety sales tax to allow implementation by councilmanic authority and greater flexibility for using those funds to cover increased officer wages, related programs like behavioral health co-response teams. Just for clarification, cities can currently implement this sales tax up to 0.3% with approval from a majority of voters. So what AWC is proposing is councilmanic and to expand the uses of that additional revenue. The second is a priority that is being considered by your neighbor, the city of Kenmore. The city has not officially adopted their agenda yet, but on their draft agenda includes a request for the legislature to authorize cities to use traffic cameras to enforce bus lane violations. For some context, in 2021, the city of Seattle obtained this authority on a pilot basis. And their pilot program runs through 2025, where they will be presenting their results and making recommendations to the legislature. Under the Seattle pilot, half of the net revenue from the traffic cameras goes to the Washington Traffic Safety Commission to fund bicycle and pedestrian safety projects all around the state. And the other half must be used to build safety and mobility improvements for people with disabilities, specifically in Seattle. Really, the case for this authority is public safety and improving travel times for transit riders, so increasing the transit service. The argument is that cameras can make the enforcement more consistent, more objective, and more fair. It also means officers can focus on other public safety needs. And I do want to note that for privacy purposes, the cameras that the city of Seattle uses and that the legislature made it clear they can only record vehicle license plates, not the people inside the car. It did take Seattle several years to attain this authority on a pilot basis. So I want everyone to be aware that this would be a heavy lift, and it may take several years to achieve. So I wanted to flag both of those items for input, for discussion as to whether they should be included on the city's legislative agenda. But before we get to that discussion, I'll wrap up by talking about some next steps. So following tonight's meeting, you all will have the opportunity to approve the city's legislative agenda, either with changes you'd like to see or as presented. Once the agenda is adopted, then those are the priorities that we will use to meet, to brief, and when we meet with our city's legislators. At the end of November, early December, the Senate and House hold committee assembly days. These are days when they kind of get a preview of the major issues that are going to be considered during the upcoming legislative session. And so those committee days are a really great time to get on legislators' radars about the issues that you want them to address. And then the 2024 legislative session begins on January 8th, and it will be here before we know it. So with that, I will stop sharing and look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Councilmember Reports.
Thank you, Shelley. And I appreciate it. We've heard a lot of these issues before, and I appreciate the update. I wanted to talk about a couple of things. First of all, I do support the public safety recruitment and retention of officers provision. You may or may not know that that's been a big issue in our city. So to the extent we could get financial assistance of some sort, that would be great. Certainly the priorities, the 4 priorities that you mentioned, I completely agree with, but I just want to flag some other things that I don't know what my colleagues will think, whether they rise to the level of priorities or whether they're just things to be aware of as the session proceeds. Transit-oriented development. We are under some legislation called a high-capacity transit city because of Sound Transit's plans to put a BRT lane northbound on Bothell Way. We are actually losing bus service. And we're not, like, if you look at the list of high-capacity transit cities, we're not like any of those. The part I like in the description of the discussions that may occur is working on pedestrian safety and multimodal mobility, because I haven't seen that heavy emphasis, and that having funding for those purposes would be great for us. But I'm just very concerned about us being tagged with very high density zoning along Bothell Way because of the Sound Transit plans, which, you know, as I said, we have actually lost bus service, not increased it in the last several years. And in particular, our Southern Gateway neighborhood is not going to have either a Sound Transit stop or very many King County Metro opportunities. So to the extent we could get excluded from some of the most intensive provisions of that legislation, it would be great. Also, Deputy Mayor French and I attended Sound City's PIC, and one of the points that they made that resonated with me as a council member for a small city is it seems we have an endless wave of new housing provisions, and it's very hard to catch up with them, to understand how they interrelate with each other. We're embarking on our 2024 comprehensive planning effort. And so if there is a way to slowly phase in some changes, especially if they're significant in terms of density or mandates, that would be helpful. Last but not least, funding for climate actions would be really helpful, and for operation and maintenance of infrastructure. Those are 2 things I think for our small city, which has very limited revenues. If there were opportunities for grants or other ways to access funding for those, it would be great. So sorry to take so much time, but anyway, thank you, Shelley. I know you do a great job for us, and under sometimes difficult circumstances.
Thank you, Councilmember Bodie. Excellent comments. Colleagues, other comments or questions for? Yes.
I guess more of a clarification. So obviously, the 1% cap is one of our top priorities, as that's really leading to our structural deficit in our revenue versus expenditures. And we do say we support AWC's legislative priorities that would reflect on the city, and they also have a priority related to the 1% cap. Was there a strategic reason why we aren't matching their priority and their ask? I don't know if that would make their position stronger or how that would work. So Shelley, I was just curious if you had some thoughts on why we aren't being as specific as they are.
Yeah, I think so AWC's kind of they do a similar process that Lake Forest Park does every year. They revisit what their priorities are going to be. And so although the 1% cap has been an item that they've worked on for many years, it actually got bumped up in terms of priorities for them this year. And this has been a priority for the city for several years. So in part, it's because this was the way that we've framed it for the last few years with our delegation. And I think in part also, like, we want the same outcome, right? We want the legislature to address the structural deficit that doesn't only exist for cities, it's for for all local taxing districts. So I think one of the reasons we wanted to structure it the way it is Lake Forest Park is unique. Unique in the sense that there is a really low sales tax revenue base. And so you're really heavily dependent on property tax. And that's not the story of every city. And AWC is representing every city. And so they're having to tell a slightly different story, even though the outcome that we're all desiring is the same. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I mean, I think I speak on behalf of the Legislative Priorities Committee, where we would welcome refinement or, tweaking of the words if you think that there's something that could be improved.
Yeah, I just think perhaps mentioning their sort of setup of the 3% or inflation and kind of the way that they've described it as being more of a proposed solution rather than just a concern about the current state of affairs might, I don't know, might mean more to our legislators, especially if they're hearing those same words from all the people. So that's just a thought. It might just have more power to bring a solution rather than just to flag the issue.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Riddle. Colleagues, any other questions, comments? Yes, Mr. Golden. Excuse me.
Yeah, thanks for the report. I also think there's strength in numbers, so I'm wondering, is there an opportunity for us to partner with some of the other cities in the first legislative district, Kenmore, Bothell, Woodinville, et cetera, if we have shared legislative interests?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the reasons that we're, considering bringing or wanted to present you all with the priority that Kenmore is considering with bus line cameras for bus lane violators. So that's one of their priorities. I don't know all the other priorities off the top of my head, but I do know Kenmore, in addition to Lake Forest Park, has had the 1% cap as one of their items for many years. So definitely speaking with one voice there.
Thank you.
Colleagues, other thoughts or questions for Ms. Helder? I'm in the unique position tonight as a policymaker and also chairing this meeting. So I'm going to put on my policy hat for a second and take the liberty of asking a couple questions and make a couple comments. One, Shelley, I think that the question of the bus, cameras for bus lane violators, we see it. I just saw it just a few minutes before I came to the council chambers tonight. It's incredibly dangerous, and not only are the folks driving the bus lanes illegally, but they're running red lights too. So hopefully they're getting ticketed by the cameras. And I think it is, to Mr. Goldman's point, I think partnering with neighboring cities, we're all sharing the corridor, and we have shared success or failure in this regard. And I think we have the same pains that we need to take a look at what we can do to help make things safer for everybody. It terrifies me to think about these people running these red lights in the bus lanes with cars when people are trying to cross our very busy highway, and our intersections are challenging to say the least. TOD, Councilmember Bodie mentioned transit-oriented development, and this is a conversation I had with our legislative delegation earlier this year, right at the end of, in the middle of their negotiations about the various housing bills. And I think the question for us is really, how do we support the appropriate development near, corridors and spines without it encompassing our entire community? And the message that I gave to our legislative delegation was, the one size fits all does not fit us, because we're so small that their range literally encompassed in some cases 2/3 of our community from a transit, from a transit route. And as Councilmember Bodie indicated, we're not benefiting from those routes the way we should be. And I think it's important for us to keep beating that drum and saying, our community is losing bus routes. We're not getting increased services, but we're paying the price from the standpoint of legislation that kind of encompasses our whole community, rather than focuses on maybe it's a percentage of the width of the community, or maybe it's something that suggests that it's within a 1 or 2 block radius of a high capacity bus route. Because I do believe that it is important for us to make sure that we're not having TOD that's pushed all the way up into Horizon View or farther, which would completely be upsetting the nature and the character of our communities. Where do you think that the TOD discussion is going to go and additional discussions about middle housing?
Yeah, thanks for the comment and question. Regarding transit-oriented development, there have been a handful of conversations just over the last few weeks with legislators that I do think are going to be kind of leading the discussion during the legislative session. It looks like the focus of TOD policy is going to be along light rail and bus rapid transit routes. Bus rapid transit is not a defined term in state statute. And so what's generally understood is that it follows the BRT lines that are described or that are called BRT within Sound Transit. So it's safe to say that it would apply along 522, but not intended, I don't think, to apply along SR 104, but we would need to make sure that we're looking at the language that's in the bill. Additionally, the bill last year looked into, they used the metric of floor area ratio as what the level of density should be. I'm still expecting that to be the metric that's used in 2024. And I do know that they're considering having higher density in the closest area, like, you know, the closest proximity to a transit station, and then moving further out, the minimum level of density would decrease. There's also been conversations about it not being a strict quarter-mile, you know, walking distance and in a circumference around the station, but more of a net, like this is the density that you need within a given area, to take into account that for some communities, it just doesn't make sense to develop on both sides of the road. Or some places may have wetlands in one area. And so really giving that control and flexibility to the local government to decide where does it make the most sense for that density to go. It sounds like there is going to be recognition that that's important, though still an expectation that density be accommodated.
Councilmember.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Bodie.
A follow-up on that point, Shelley. What I recall last time is when they were talking about the floor area ratio, there were some really excellent drawings that someone or photoshopped things that perhaps someone had put together from AWC. I'm not sure, but it showed like, well, if you have a lot limitation, then you could build a 9-story building, and it showed in Ballard a comparable 9-story building and what that looked like. So I do recall that there were serious problems with that floor area ratio, and maybe if it's applied over a broader area, it wouldn't result in the, you know, giant skinny 9-foot housing towers along 522. But I would appreciate you keeping your eye on this and any opportunity, because I think there is no other community affected by a BRT that is like ours in terms of the small size and the limited benefit. We're really getting like zero. We would rather not be a BRT city for that matter, and just be a regular old bus transit city. And so if you could keep an eye on that and check back with us if things are going in a wrong direction, and see if there's any opportunity to carve us into a smaller, a little more flexible category, that would be good.
Thank you, Councilmember Bodie. Mr. Furutani.
Hi, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Helder, for your work. One of the questions I had, and completely changing gears here, minor bill that would really help our residents here is that Energy Navigator Bill, HB 1391. It was last session, and I'm wondering, are the, you know, I know all the bills get automatically reintroduced that didn't pass last time, but what was the hang up on this bill? Do you recall anything that basically we could do to help? And this certainly would help our residents tremendously, because the state's made huge investments in all kinds of energy stuff, and it would be great for people to know what rebates and what kinds of incentives are out there.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I didn't recall where the bill ended off the top of my head, but I just looked it up. It made it out of the House on a bipartisan vote, and then it died in the Senate committee. And so given that it made it all the way out of the House last year, I do expect that it will definitely have consideration again in the second year of the biennium. Really, the challenge of every bill in a short session is 60 days is a really short amount of time. This bill has the advantage, since it got out of the House, it doesn't have to go back to the House. It can start in the Senate, and once it gets out of the Senate modifies it in any way, then it would have to go back to the House for concurrence. But if the Senate doesn't modify that bill, it can go straight to the governor's desk. So it's in a good position in a supplemental year. I don't know the fiscal note off the top of my head. So I would say the challenge facing this bill is if there is a large fiscal note, the budget writers are going to have to prioritize funding for this program.
Right, thanks.
That's an excellent question. Thank you very much, Mr. Furutani. Colleagues, other questions for Ms. Helder? Okay, thank you. Well, this will be an ongoing conversation, and we really appreciate the update, Shelley, and for your hard work on our behalf. It's I know this is going to be a shorter session, but it's going to be an important one. It sounds like it's going to be pretty jam-packed. So thank you. With that, we're going to move on. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Shelley.
Yeah, take care. Okay, we have next, we are done with presentations. We're moving on to a whole host of public hearings. Public hearing on ordinance 23-1278, amending section 16.16.250 of the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code, reasonable use exception. And I guess we'll start with the staff presentation. Mr. Hill, welcome. Sitting here roasting under the heater here. Wow, it's warm right here. Is it?
Sit here, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I'm used to sitting over there. It's like either freeze or get too hot. Is it? Thanks, Matt. Is it? I don't know whether it's adjustable. Sort of adjustable.
All right, so as you mentioned before you tonight is the ordinance that would adopt new or updated regulations to the reasonable use exception 16.16.250 of the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code. If you remember, this came out of some conversations with the community, went before our planning commission for review, and they forwarded to you their recommendations. Along with that came a policy section that discusses that RUE should approve the bare minimum amount of use and disturbance to critical areas and recognize the city's obligation to not unconstitutionally take private property. The purpose and intent sections provides a list of purposes and guidelines for consideration when the hearing examiner is applying the criteria to an application requesting a reasonable use exception. The guidelines include footprint square footage, gross floor area square footage, and minimizing the area of critical area disturbances on the application site. This has been before the Department of Commerce on expedited review, and we received that. It has gone through the CPRO process, the determination of non-significance. And so tonight you are holding a public hearing, after which the council could consider adoption of this ordinance. Nothing has changed since the last time you saw it. We took it and got those approvals that we needed. So any questions for me?
Colleagues, questions for Mr. Hill? Councilmember Bowden.
As the liaison to the planning commission, I just want to thank you for continuing to bring this forward, and we're now at the point of the public hearing. So I'm just very pleased that we've been able to get it here, because there were a few moments where it lost a little momentum here and there by the press of other business. So just a comment that I thank the team for bringing this forward, including our city attorney.
Yeah, thank you. Colleagues, any of the other questions for Mr. Hill or Ms. Pratt? Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
This is a bit premature, but I'm curious how the new middle housing and ADU legislation works with the reasonable use exception, since it's so that I'd like an updated that at some point when we when those are more defined as far as what the codes are requiring, whether those are going to be considered a required reasonable use, or if a single unit is still the maximum that a reasonable use can do. And I think there's still some questions about that.
There's still a lot of questions
So,
about that, to your
I
point.
Would love to see an update at some point on.
Our consultants, so Leland, who is part of the consulting group for the comp plan, is currently working to understand how all of those bills come together. And there's still a lot of question on that, but we hope through the effort of the comp plan update. I think I reported to you that we have received the additional $50,000 that we requested through Commerce, through a grant that will help us take a deeper dive into that 30 to 50% AMI of the middle housing and ADUs and all that. So how that all comes together, nobody quite knows yet, but yeah, that's one of the questions we want to answer as we go through this process.
On point, even the split lots, if something on split lots passes, which is different than subdivisions, it could potentially raise some of those questions, for example.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, also on point, it'll be interesting to know. My understanding is that both the middle housing and ADU bills say that lots that have critical areas are exempt. So that reading would seem to imply that since they're exempt from the new housing bills, then this would be a moot point, but it would be good to know that my interpretation is actually the right one.
I concur with your interpretation, if it means anything.
I just have a quick question, Mr. Hill. Has Commerce come back and reconciled the two bills yet, or are they still?
Not the last
I
I
did- I
talked
assumed-
to
I knew the
Leland,
answer.
they're still waiting for that
Yeah.
reconciliation. We have them coming back for the housing needs assessment before the planning commission next month. Hopefully they have something for us by that point in time, but.
And just for the clarification, and you can explain it much better than I can, Mr. Hill, is the question is whether the bills are additive or they are mutually, what's the best way to put it?
Yeah,
Intertwined somehow.
ADUs count.
Yeah, there you
Is
go.
the,
Yeah,
do
it is
ADUs count?
confusing.
Yeah. for the multi
Yeah.
units, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah,
One final
Please.
clarification, and so the a property that is developed with the reasonable use exemption has that limitation sort of into the deed, into the property itself. So if we were to allow a reasonable use exemption later larger, then they could build more, or would it be locked in at this position?
you mean to go back and reconsider the previous reasonable use
Okay.
exception? I mean,
But it wouldn't be automatic.
no,
Okay.
I think once a decision's made and it's running with the land, if you want
It goes with the land.
reconsideration, you would have to come back.
Okay, thank you. I was pretty sure that's what it was. I was glad you gave me clarification.
thank you. Colleagues, if there are no more questions, we'll move on to the public hearings. Thank you, Mr. Hill, very much, and thank you, Kim. Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing on ordinance 23-1278, amending section 16.16.250 of the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code, reasonable use exception. Thank you, Chief.
Some mistakes.
Okay, is there anyone in the council chambers that would like to make public comment or testify, I should say, at the public hearing on the reasonable use exception code? Excuse me. Okay, Matt, is there anyone online? I don't believe we have anybody attending. Okay. With that, I will close the public comment, the public hearing on ordinance 23-1278. Okay, let's see. Then moving on, we are on to discussion, consideration and or action on ordinance 23-1278, amending chapter 16.16.250 of Lake Forest Park Municipal Code, reasonable use exception to allow for reasonable economic use. Colleagues, what's your pleasure? Councilmember Bodie.
I would just say, as someone who has followed along with this from the community comment through the planning commission process with our planning director, and the council discussions, I'm strongly in support of this ordinance.
Thank you, Councilmember Bodie. Colleagues, any other comments or thoughts?
Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
I believe have the option to actually vote on this evening, if that is correct, and I would like to move an action on this evening.
I would concur with that. Any just quick comment, if I may. I have also been following this very closely, and many members of the community have been asking us to revise this for a number of years. I want to thank the Planning Commission, our staff, Councilmember Bodie as liaison to the Planning Commission. This is important legislation. I think it's very responsible. We may have to modify it at some point, but I do believe it closes some gaps that we have discovered that are necessary for us to make sure to protect the integrity of the environment and our community. And so I will be supporting this as well. With that, I'd entertain a motion. Councilmember Riddle.
I move to approve ordinance 23-1278, amending chapter 1616-250 of the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code, reasonable use exemption to allow for reasonable economic use.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, colleagues? Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
Echoing my colleagues' sentiments, this is, I think, a necessary revision. It makes the hearing examiner have more criteria to be able to work with. So there's less variability, and it's more in our code. And I think that's going to help folks know if they're trying to develop in here where their boundaries are, so they can know that before they try to develop in this community, and they know our community values. So I fully support this.
Councilmember Furtani.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I'm in support of this ordinance as well. One of the things I really appreciate about the work everyone's done on it is the policy and the purpose and intent, because being able to communicate decades into the future what the heck we meant by doing this is so critical, as we're discovering when we look at older ordinances.
Thank you. That's great to recognize that, Councilmember Furtani, and we should all be thinking about that as we go forward. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of passing ordinance 23-1278, amending chapter 16.16.250, the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code, reasonable use exception to allow for reasonable economic use, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any nays? That passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. That's very important work. Okay, we're moving on to an additional series of public hearings, Public hearing on the proposed 2024 property tax levy, the 2024 surface water utility rate and tax, 2024 user fees, and the amendment to the 2023-2024 biennial budget. I need another glass of water after reading that. Director Vaughn, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor or Deputy Mayor and Council. And thank you, Matt, for putting up the presentation. Thanks. So walking through some information that will be a review for council and probably some new to the public. So a brief overview of the public hearing. We're going to do, I will do as the finance director, a brief overview. There will be questions and comments from council, and then we will open the public hearing for the citizen comments for 3 minutes. Walking into one of my favorite topics, the property tax levy. The city, although the city does adopt their budget on a biennial basis, property tax and surface water, those two have to be adopted on an annual basis. So even though we did adopt our biennial budget with the intent to move this action forward, it does have to be moved forward individually. So then walking down to go down the table, this is about the simplest way I can come up with because the actual assessor's way is much more complex and very confusing. So the highest lawful levy is what the city was able to levy in 2023. Then they call it the limit factor increase, which is very broadly referred to, that Shelley even referred to as the 1% increase. And so tagging on to that, the value of the 1% is just over 34,000. Then you get the subtotal. We lost the presentation. Go into the new construction value.
Find out. I think Matt will be back in just one moment.
That's okay. I can still continue.
Please.
Continue. So then we walk down and we get the new construction value and the prior year refunds, which those are estimated amounts. And so, and there's also some other amounts that are not quite finalized at this point, as we're still in a preliminary stage. And so, yay, it's back. And so that's the bottom line there, the estimate high for additional changes. That actually was recommended by our county assessor to increase it. Typically, I've had a much lower number there, and that was on her recommendation. So we took it and walking forward to the next slide. There's quite a bit of information on this slide, and I'm aware of that. I'm trying to not overload a slide, but that being said, each piece of this plays into the example. So the top portion of the proposed 2024 property tax levy, that is literally a snippet of the previous slide. Just having the 1% there. So the current levy rate for 2023 is in blue. And walking down the proposed levy rate for 2024, again, as I stated on the previous slide, is a preliminary number. And that preliminary estimate was provided by the county on 10/5. And so that is our proposed levy rate. And then walking over, and then walking down one more step, the calculation, because the part that everybody seems to be very interested in is what does that mean for their individual property taxes? And so with this calculation, you can figure it out for whatever your individual assessed value would be, plugging in the proposed levy rate to come up with the value. And then walking over to the right portion of the slide, the example on the 2023 median residence value is 903,000. And so that is then what we use to show the math, walking across of what that value would be for 2023, and then walking it across for using the levy rate of 2024. Now, the table below is showing the assessed value and taxes by the city. That is a direct snippet to show where the 903 for the median value, where that came from, which is directly off of King County's website. So although this slide is packed, it's all information that is pertinent to the example.
Councilmember Riddle?
If I may have a liberty,
Absolutely.
I've tried frequently to understand our property tax. And so if you wouldn't mind going back a slide, I want to make a point that's come fairly clear to me most recently, is that this particular slide here tells nothing about homeowners' values, home property values, commercial property values. It purely looks at the revenue we collected last year, applies the 1%, and shows the next revenue that we can collect, independent of whether property values have gone up or down.
That is correct.
It's that simple. So it's not, this slide is not tied to property values whatsoever.
Correct.
So then when you go to the next slide, that's the crazy calculations that the assessor does to say, okay, of the total taxes that city is going to be collecting, that upper left subtotal of levy amount, what percentage of the value of your home is related to the entire assessed value of the entire city.
Yeah.
And then this calculation just says, what is your share of that? It doesn't create the revenue. It's simply a way of applying the revenue equitably to all the values of the different properties across the city. Is that legitimate?
So that is correct. So the property tax that a homeowner pays doesn't just come to the city. The city actually ends up with a very small portion of that property tax, which is around 9%. The rest of the property tax goes to the county and the schools, and we also have the fire and the library district. Those play into ours in addition. And so we are a very small piece of the pie at 9%. And that's the levy rate. So when you look down actually at the median value, and then it says $8.60, that levy rate, the city is only receiving less than $1 of that levy
Yeah.
rate.
So I think I just want to be very clear that this is great for us to understand, but it's really how the assessor is just divvying up the total revenue so that each property owner is getting their share based off of the value of their property. That's why some people pay more and some people pay less. But it isn't particularly tied to your specific or your specific value of your property. The revenue is simply what we can collect plus 1%, and then this applies that.
Peanut butter.
Yeah, trying to apply evenly across the entire city. And so for me, that was just kind of a critical thing to me realize. The revenue is really not tied to house values anymore. It's a completely sort of
That is-
separate
It's
calculation.
detached.
It's completely detached.
So as you can see, the assessed value has gone up, so the levy rates will go down.
down,
So,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction. Mr. Goldman.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the example calculation. So I can't speak for anybody else's house, but when I got the property valuation notice, my house went down by 10%.
Mhm.
And I would imagine that's similar for many others in the community. And so if you look at the raw numbers, the levy rate from in blue is this year and red is next year, it's going up, but our house values are going down. And so those are mostly going to cancel out. If you're in a median house in the city, it'll cancel out bar the 1% increase. So even though that sample calculation makes it seem like your property taxes are going to be 15% higher, that is counterbalanced by how much your values have fallen.
That's correct. And I hope this is as clear as mud to everybody. This is probably one of the most complex topics that,
Yeah, Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on that because I have that exact same observation, and mine is very personal because my house is very close to the median residence value. And I believe last time we looked at this at the start of the biennial budget, I figured out that the amount of money I personally, my household pays to our city of Lake Forest Park was like just shy of $700 a
Yeah.
year, which shocked me when I realized that's how little I'm giving for all the city services that we provide. And so now under this one, I'd be at, right about the same amount actually. So because my assessed value also went down. So the complexity of this is so hard because every time I talk with people, they assume 1% means that their property taxes on their house are going up and the levy rate is going up. And so the peanut butter kind of calculation, where as the assessed values actually go up, you actually pay a little bit less too, or if they go down, you might stay kind of the same. And that the 1% is only $34,000. Those are things that escape a lot of the community, but as much as we try to explain it, it's really hard. It is really hard.
and as this presentation continues, you will see how quickly that 34,000 can,
Disappear.
Right.
Councilmember Reports. Yeah.
So thanks, Deputy Mayor. And thank you, Ms. Vaughn, for your presentation. It's really clear that if you just look at the upper left table, that is say the one that you had from the previous slide as well, the 34,000 that the city is increasing, if we divide it by about the 3,400 residences that are in the city, on average, it means the homeowner pays $10 to the city more this coming year. And that's really kind of the bottom line for the city. The numbers that are in the rest of this reflect all of the other taxing entities that are in the county.
Yeah.
Councilmember Riddle.
And I think what we sort of started talking about is as the assessed value of the entire city goes up and the entire city goes down, you're still paying your same percentage in relation to what the whole city's assessed value is. So you'll only see a significant change in yours if somehow you jump up in a value above your you know, you build a new home or you do a major remodel. That's the only time you'll see really a big jump, because kind of we're all the boats rise and
Right.
fall with the same tide. And what's really important is how is your value in relation to the general city as a whole. And as long as it's all going up together, your taxes really aren't going up more than that $10.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Furton.
And to place it in context, some of you may have actually seen this in the news today. Edmonds is doing exactly the same thing we're doing. They approved their 1% levy lid increase last night. It made the news because their city's $2 million in debt. And this is actually not going very far into that debt. So they have much harder choices to make. So one of the things I really appreciate about this city and its staff is that we've actually managed to get through the whole fiscal crisis of the past few years without actually becoming a news item region-wide.
Thank you, Mr. Furton. Well, just quick comment on point. I think too, you know, it's extraordinary to me in all my years of policymaking and in my years previously as a volunteer. This is a perennial conversation because our taxation system, property tax system, is so difficult to understand. And I can predict right now, somebody looks at this slide, if they want to be, if they don't understand it, and I won't do math on TV, Director Vaughn, I promise I won't. Somebody could take some numbers and spin them into a place that they shouldn't be. And as Mr. Furtani said, and other folks have set up here, the number to look at is the 1% at this present moment is $34,346 spread across the entire city of Lake Forest Park, the entire assessed value. And so it isn't a significant amount. I'm not taking away from the fact that any amount, it can be a hardship for some folks. And I think it's important for us to recognize, but we are losing ground. And I think it's important to recognize that too. Mr. Goldman.
So I will do math live on.
Oh, no.
I actually ran the numbers based on my home's value. So this current year, I paid $461 of property tax to the city. Using those numbers, next year, I'll pay $473. So it's an increase to the city of $12 for my house.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's not even a month's city council wage.
All right. No more math on TV, people. Let's move along, please. I get nervous. Okay. So, well, thank you. Director Vaughn, please continue.
So moving on to the next slide, market and cost of living adjustments. There's been quite a bit of movement around this during this biennium. So the Police Guild in 2023, there was a standard COLA, but due to the hardships, and actually this was a perfectly timed to have the conversation of our state lobbyist in front of me, Shelley, all of the challenges that police have had hiring, retaining, and for how many retirements are upcoming has walked us into the police department and the police chief having a conversation with council about approving an additional 3 limited term employee positions to assist during this transition to try to keep their staff fully staffed. And so that was approved through council, and now it's time to make those changes in the actual budget. Then walking down to the Teamsters Union, we have the 2022, there was a 3% retro pay. And that is not because we are technically behind, it's because that union agreement wasn't ratified until this year, like spring of this year. And so with that being said, because it's a union agreement, we need to go back and make that adjustment. In 2023 and 2024, there were cost of living adjustments put in for that group. That being said, there were additional market adjustments that were not included that do need to be adjusted and added in and increased in the budget. Then walking down to the we call them the MPEs, the management professional employees, or the non-represented. There's the 2024 market adjustments. And so actually we did it this year, and there's a range of some positions being actually within range of market. And there are other positions that need to be significantly adjusted. That being said, the way that the city is doing that. That doesn't mean that if a position is getting a larger swing, that the employee would see that larger swing. And then walking into the next slide, the general fund expenses. So dispatch. The city earlier this year was notified that Bothell, who they've had as their dispatch for a very long time, was moving to Norcom. That being said, the chief did a very robust evaluation of options and came back with that that was the best option to move forward with. That being said, in 2023, that's an increase from what was originally budgeted of almost 42,000, and the 2024 cost significantly went up to over 283. Walking down to police rifles, this was a House bill which resulted in police officers previously were able to use personal rifles during police and work-related operations. That House bill changed that, so they are no longer allowed to do that. Therefore, that put the city in a position of needing to purchase rifles for each officer because they have to be calibrated per that person. That being said, the original cost that was proposed actually ended up, the chief, I will give him credit here, ended up finding a different solution, which actually originally I think it was supposed to be over 90,000, and then it's just over 70. The health and wellness grant, this is on both sides. We got a grant, and then the police department purchased some gym equipment in order to have a health and wellness grant. And then jail services, walking down, this is kind of a police and court. There were significant increases in the jail services with the loss of Yakima County for the longer term defendant stays. That being stated, the chief and the court worked together evaluating and recently came up with a cost-saving solution to not house long-term defendants in Snohomish and King County, which is a much higher cost. And now we've signed an interlocal agreement with Sunnyside to house those longer-term defendants. That being said, that was recently done, so we very cautiously are only expanding that a smaller amount. And we are hopeful that that will be an excellent relationship. So walking down to the Blake reimbursement, this is where the state versus Blake, basically anybody that had any type of drugs on them basically was charged, and when that overturned, then they basically the courts had to refund the fines that were issued. And that being said, the city had the opportunity to be reimbursed for those fines that they then had to pay out. And so you'll see that on both sides, revenue and expenditure. So then walking down to the additional adjustments, the Washington opioid settlement. This was a big settlement between multiple states, counties, and cities. And the only side that's being adjusted at this time is the revenue side. The funds do have to be used to combat the opioid pandemic. That being stated, the city has not yet determined how they are going to expend those funds. So then the surface sewer and surface water utilities, this is the utility tax. The revenue is collected by the ratepayers, which becomes an expense to both of the utility funds. And then it then walks into revenue into the general fund. And that because the utility tax was a new revenue that was adopted in the original or in the budget, the biennial budget, the city elected to only put in 1 year's worth, knowing that we were intending to adjust it at the mid-buy. Well, that time has come, and so we're making that adjustment. And then this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about is the investment diversification that we finally got across the finish line. I've been talking about it basically since I walked through the door as your finance director, to diversify the funds, the cash flow, and have the city's funds work for them. So that strategy was approved by Budget and Finance Committee this spring. And we've been able to implement that, increasing a very strategic laddered approach of government agency bonds, which has definitely resulted in an excellent return. And this is one of the only things that the finance department can do, or that the city can do, that generates revenue across every single fund the city has. So that's exciting in our world. So then walking down to what was actually just discussed on Monday at a meeting. So you actually will not see this additional $5,000 in the ordinance that's presented in the packet, but I did want to go ahead and add it into the presentation to make note that it was discussed and agreed upon by council that they intend to add an additional $5,000 to the Shore Lake Arts in the 2024 budget. And then walking to the proposed sewer rate increases for 2024, it's $3.62 as a monthly increase. And I think these little snippets very clearly walk through. When we discuss the county portion of the rate, that is the direct pass through of the costs that we recoup from the ratepayers that goes directly to King County in order to pay for the sewer treatment charges. The city's portion is the portion in order to continue operations for staff and expenses. So then walking down, you can see the monthly increase, the total increase of an aggregate 5%, but showing that the county's portion went up 5.75% and the city's portion went up 3%.
Director Vaughn, just on point, Councilmember Bodie will recall this from our Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee. There was significant pushback against the county during the last couple of years regarding very radically high increases in the fees, and the cities all said our citizens cannot stomach these 20, I think the highest was 22% in 1 year. And successfully the group was helped with this, as well as with the Association of Washington Cities, lobbied the county to make sure that the charges were kept on a modest pace rather than increases at a modest pace rather than a precipitous jump upwards, because 20% is a very 21 or 22% is a very large increase from some people. And I just wanted to make that note because hopefully we continue to make sure that these increases are moderate, but there may be a bow wave coming at some point.
I agree. And since I have been in the finance director seat and prior to even being at this city, when this has come up and King County was trying to figure out and navigate what to do expense wise and asking finance directors what they thought about doing these really large increases, I said, you are going to, I mean, I understand that the costs are increasing, but you better take the time to tell the story of why the costs are increasing and be very transparent with the numbers, so that people can wrap their brains around why it's increasing so much and try to minimize it. I said, even if you have to do a little bit of a larger, which I would define 5.75 as a little bit of a larger increase over time, so that you have the time to tell the story and explain and show the numbers, because people need to understand why. I think that is very important.
Thank you, Director Vaughn. Apologies for the interruption.
And so I guess just one final topic, the city does bill on a bi-monthly basis. So this will be an even $153 on the bi-monthly in 2024. Then walking into the proposed surface water rate increases. The proposal here that was built into the original adopted budget, but back to what I stated at the very beginning of the presentation, that even though this rate increase was adopted in the biennial budget, the city still has to increase this rate and send it to King County as the entity that administers this increase to on an annual basis. So the increase is proposed at 10%. That annual increase is a value of $24.62 to a single family residential. And then it does walk down through the table, the single family residence, and then the other classifications for surface water. And then also one other item of note that is not on the slide is in the capital surface water, that this also does support operating and surface water capital. And the city has, I will say, we have been a big advocate on getting culverts replaced in this city, which has depleted that capital fund. And then we have another project that we need to amend in for the 35th Avenue project.
So Director Bond, just on point, I try to make a finer point here that it's about $2 more per month per household.
That is correct.
Yeah. Colleagues, any questions on the previous two proposals? Excuse me. Thank you, Director Bond, please continue. Gosh.
So then the final slide, it walks into the user fee rate. They're not free. User fee rate increases. The building fees are increasing by 9.8% following the International Code Councils for the August 2023 update. And Calvin, our building official, came to council, I believe previously, just recently, can't remember exactly which meeting that was, and gave an update. And so those fee increases are within the schedule. Also, what we've previously talked about, the sewer water rate increase and the surface water rate increases are both showing as part of that 2024 user fee schedule. And that, oh,
Yeah.
Yes, Councilmember Wood.
Director Vaughn, I just wanted to follow up. Last year when we were looking at the biennial budget and our user fee schedule, I recall that we refreshed our building user fees to make sure we did a review to make sure they reflected actual costs and we weren't actually losing money in terms of staff time on the building fees. And so I assume that concept is still true and carrying through here.
I am deferring to
The city administrator is nodding his head.
I'm looking to other directors, as this is not 100% my area of expertise, confirming that before I publicly answer that they agree with me.
There were head nods over here for
Yes.
the people out there.
From city
Peter,
administrator and
Yes.
public works
Mr.
director.
Lebo.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that question. So we did sort of true up our building user fees last year, and at 9.8%, does that reflect that you would actually see an increase of 9.8% on your building user fees? And how does that relate to our actual costs? Because have our costs gone up accordingly to the International Billing Code, or is it just a reflection of what the industry does, and therefore are we over increasing our rates?
I'm gonna have to
Mr. Hill.
defer.
I think what we'd have to do is pull the increases that we've seen to wages and costs in the city to compare that for you, but that's something we can bring back.
Yeah, I would prefer that we just don't follow the sheep, but rather we reflect what our costs are to be fair and reasonable to our taxpayers.
Councilmember Riddle.
I would like more clarification on that as well. I believe it looks like it's the dollar per square foot fee, so it's just accommodating the cost of construction going up, but I would love the clarification of that.
Absolutely noted on both. And noted by all.
Mr. Lebo?
Thank you for the presentation. I had a question, maybe a small one here regarding the 2024 user fee schedules. And we've put a line through the technology surcharge and to be added to all fees and struck that, which used to be 10%. Could you please describe the rationale for that?
I'm going to defer to Attorney Pratt on this one.
So in looking at the 2024 user fee schedule draft, I'm on page 52 of the packet. We've struck the technology surcharge, which was at 10%.
Only for the PRA. public records request. Should have only been-
I see. It's all
Oh,
line item underneath the photocopies, records and reports.
and that's because,
Because the Public Records Act requires you, if you include fees for anything that's not in the statute, you have to explain how you arrived at that fee. And we did not explain how we arrived at that 10%. For the public records requests. Why it's 10%, why it's 5%.
okay, thank you. But do our cost for public records requests reflect what we think to be a reasonable cost?
They reflect the statutory bills.
Okay, thank you.
We have not done that. now. What are our actual expenditures?
But are we permitted to charge our actuals, or is it,
To go through that analysis, hold the public hearing, there's factors you have to consider, but yes, you are allowed to do that analysis.
do we think we're far off in terms of what we're charging compared to our costs that we'd otherwise be reasonably able to charge?
Yes.
Again, it should be fair to our taxpayers that we're not subsidizing others that would otherwise be paying for things that not are necessarily related to all our taxpayers. Our costs have to come from our revenue to cover our costs have to come from all of our taxpayers. But if only a certain.
Councilmember Bodie?
Yes, I just want to say that it seems to me that responding to public record requests is part of being a government and responsive and transparent to our citizens. So I'm not sure I would support raising our rates.
Thank you, Councilmember. And just on point, I know that public record requests, particularly egregious ones, has been a perennial topic at every legislative session. And they're trying to find some ways to encourage that there is not
Overuse.
overuse is probably that you're very
Yes.
polite, Councilmember Bodie. People that are trying to be injurious to communities just to make money. That's really what it comes down to, including people out of the country, which is quite alarming to me. Colleagues, any other questions on point? Mr. Lebo, did you have another thought?
Yeah, just refresh my memory. We did raise certain taxes in this past year as a way to generate additional revenue. Could you remind me of which ones those were?
That is correct. We did the user or the utility tax, which I stated previously in a slide that we were increasing them again. The sewer and surface water utility tax. And then in addition, we raised two for the transportation benefit district. We implemented the sales tax option in order to generate revenue to assist with the repair and maintenance of our roads and our overlays and then we also did same transportation benefit district. We increased the tab by an additional 10% in order to generate. So there were 4. 2. Is that what you were referring to? Correct?
Thank you.
We can move on. Colleagues, any other thoughts, questions for Director Vaughn on topic? Okay, thank you, Director Vaughn.
And that, just the final side, that concludes. Ta-da!
Y'all are too quick to the punch here. We're already, now do you have any questions or comments? I guess. Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
Just noting that in our packet, the staff recommendation is to obviously do our public hearing today and then adopt on November 9th. Is that because there's that kind of final adjustment that you want to get that isn't included in here, like the $5,000 for, or is there another reason why the staff recommendation is to do this in the following business meeting?
I think historically, the city has valued input.
Okay.
And if there is input that needs to be considered in the intent is not to adopt on a night of a public hearing, just as a past practice.
Okay, thank you.
For the budget.
Just
I will
clarifying.
say for the budget.
Yeah.
Let me be real clear on that.
That's correct, Director Vaughn, and I think it's been our practice to do that. However, it really depends on whether we have public comments or not. Mr. Goldman.
Just a comment. I wanted to thank you and Director Perigo on the user fee table. You added some items to the building fees just to be more transparent, to make sure it matches what's on the website. So I think that does a service to the community so they know exactly what sort of fees they'll be paying. So thank you for including that.
It takes a team.
Thank you. If there are no further questions for Director Vaughn, we will go ahead and open. Thank you very much, Director Vaughn. Public hearing on the proposed 2024 property tax levy, 2024 surface water utility rate and tax. Sorry, it's on the next line. The carriage return there. 2024 user fees and the amendment to the 2023-2024 biennial budget. Thank you, sir. And I will go ahead and open the public hearing. And we do not have anyone signed up to give testimony in the public hearing. Is there anyone in the group that would like to make public testimony at this time on those four topics? Okay, we'll close that off for within the chambers. Have we had any new additions to the virtual world, Mr.
No, we haven't.
Senior?
Nope.
No. Okay. With that, we have no public comment and we'll close the public hearing. Thank you, everybody. Oh, do you need a blank page or not? Okay. And we are moving on now to discussion, consideration, and or action on the following. Is there any discussion on ordinance? We'll start with item D, ordinance 23-2012 reset. 1279, levying the general taxes for the city of Lake Forest Park in King County for the fiscal year commencing January 1, 2024 on all property, both real and personal, for the purpose of providing sufficient revenue. Colleagues, any discussion on that topic or questions?
Nothing new.
Okay, moving on to ordinance 23-1280, levying the property tax for the calendar year 2024. Okay, no questions or comments. Moving on to F, resolution 23-1922, setting the surface water utility rates. And I will just make the comment myself that this, and Mr. Furtani will test this, it is a very, very important fee that doesn't really cover what we need to be doing in this community with the additional environmental regulations that are so necessary to protect our environment. Comments or questions, colleagues? G, resolution 23-1923, adopting the 2024 user fees. Okay, hearing none. And H, ordinance 23-1281, amending the adopted biennial budget for the years 2023-2024. Any comments or questions? Okay, thank you all. And I would just ask whether or not there is, since there has not been public comment or testimony, either online or writing or in person, it is an option to consider passage of these items. Mr. Goldman.
I don't believe we're ready to pass the adopted biennial budget because at the very least, we have to add in the 5,000 for Shore Lake
Fair enough.
parts.
Councilmember Brutal.
And we're hoping to get some additional feedback
fees.
on the building fees as well. So I agree, we're not quite ready.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And rather than doing it piecemeal, we can certainly do it at in the aggregate
Mhm.
at a later, well, on the November 9th, 2 weeks from today, I believe. Hey, thank you, Director Vaughn. Appreciate that. And thank you, colleagues. Moving on to item 8. Do I hear a motion for adoption of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Any discussion? All those in favor of passage of the consent calendar, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you, colleagues. That passes unanimously. And moving on to ordinances and resolutions for council discussion. Item 9, Mr. Hill, resolution 23-1926, authorizing the mayor to accept the Department of Commerce Growth Management Act periodic grant update grant fiscal year 2024. I'm assuming this is 20.
And it's not.
It's
This is
not.
another one.
It's another one. Hallelujah.
This one you owe to Director Bennett. This was one of the last things he applied for
Okay.
before he left, was working and passed it on to me. But so this is a grant from the Department of Commerce in an amount not to exceed $62,500 to help pay for our comprehensive plan update. As you know, when I previously brought the SCJ contract to you, that was all coming out of the professional services budget for the planning department, which is tight. And so, you know, we're going to have to squeak by through the rest of the year. So this will help. This will relieve that by the $62,500. The scope of work that was put into this grant was the draft housing needs assessment, which is currently underway. Mandatory review and update individual comprehensive plan elements, including land use, housing, which is informed by the housing needs assessment, transportation, capital facilities and utilities, and optional elements, including environmental quality and shorelines, economic development, human services and recreation and open space, and then climate change and SEPA review. I can report to you that currently the city's consultant is moving ahead full steam on items that are listed in this and would meet the target of next June 30th of 2024 to have those items completed. This is a reimbursement agreement with the Commerce, so we submit the work product to them. Then beyond this, we have gotten 50,000 that will help us towards the housing study, and then we'll be applying for climate planning money here in the next day or two. So I did give you a stack recommendation and motion if you want to approve this tonight, so we could get back to Commerce. It is just acceptance of the dollars, and just as I said, we'll supplant the dollars that we've already allocated through the planning budget. Any questions for me?
Colleagues, questions, Mr. Hill? If not, I'd entertain a motion to suspend our rules.
Yes, I move to suspend our three-touch rule to be able to consider resolution 23-1926, authorizing the mayor to accept the Department of Commerce Growth Management Act periodic update grant for fiscal year 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye to suspend the three-touch rule. Aye. That passes. Excuse me, any nays? Make sure that somebody's not being quiet over here. That passes unanimously. Thank you, colleagues, and I entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda item.
I'd move to adopt resolution 23-1926, authorizing the mayor to accept the Department of Commerce Growth Management Act periodic update grant fiscal year 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you, council, and thank you, Mr. Hill, staff, Mr. Bennett as well for that. Okay, we're on to Director Perigo, ordinances and resolutions for action. Resolution 23-1927, authorizing the mayor to sign a service agreement with Pat's Trees and Landscape for 2023-2025 tree service. We don't have any trees around here, so,
That's correct.
okay. Sorry, a little levity at 9 o'clock is appropriate. even
No
though it's
worries.
Bad levity.
No worries. I appreciate that. So tonight, the Department of Public Works is seeking approval for a 2-year pre-service contract totaling just over $300,000 to provide tree and vegetation management services for the city. As you may recall, it was about this time last year that council approved a 1-year tree services contract. Since approving that $100,000 tree service contract, nearly all of the funds have been exhausted to address the removal of 42 trees over the last 11 months. And we do have 4 trees that are still in the queue for removal. This year, we are on pace to remove roughly 1 tree per week. With each tree costing typically between $1,500 and $5,000 per tree, depending on the situation. As we see the effects of climate change, specifically more severe weather events and summertime droughts, we can expect to see more trees impacted and distressed from those effects. To address the city's needs for ongoing tree maintenance, the Department of Public Works recommends the award of the contract for 2023-25 tree services to Pat's Trees Landscaping. The contractor submitted the lowest responsible bid in response to the city's invitation. This is a 2-year unit price based services contract that uses a work order process to authorize limited scopes of work. The combined value of the work orders will not exceed $304,890 and has included that in the contract as a not to exceed amount. So again, we're looking for approval tonight as we are in need for tree services currently. And again, this is a unit, basically a unit price contract or an on-call.
Councilmember Riddle.
Just a clarification, because it is called the 2023-2025, but it's a 2-year contract. What is the bracketing dates again on that?
The current contract that we have, again, we've exhausted most of the funds and it ends at the end, I believe it's the end of November. So we need to start that immediately. So.
Understood. So there's no gap.
Correct.
Thank you.
Colleagues, Mr. Lebo.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm fine with the contract. Just that on future contract requests awards, would you include a bid tab showing the bidders and the amounts?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lebo. Councilmember Furtoni.
Yes, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Director Perigo. One question I had was that it's more of an observation. You know, I go around the city and see a lot of work being done on trees, and whether it's done by a private landowner or by the city, it's sometimes unclear. Is there a way that there could be a sign that says your tax dollars at work, doing this tree, that kind of thing? Because I think it's kind of important to residents and people passing through that. Yeah, the city is taking care of its trees.
Let me think about that and see what we might be able to do.
Thank you, Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this to us. It seems reasonable. Question for you. You mentioned that there's an increase in the number of trees that are being removed. Are we required to replace the trees? And if so, is that part of this contract?
No, replacement is not part of this contract.
Are we as a city required to replace the trees?
Well, I don't believe we are. These are trees that are either damaged because of storm or because of they were dying. So I guess I'd have to refer to Director.
I have to look it up. Okay.
Okay.
This is, we'll get back to you. That's all right. It's a good question, though.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Perigo. Colleagues, any other questions for Director Perigo? Okay, and I understand you're looking for action this evening.
Yes,
Jeff. Okay, colleagues, I'd entertain a motion to suspend our 3-touch rule.
So moved, a motion to suspend the 3-touch rule for resolution 23-1927, so that we have a continuous coverage for our tree care.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? The ayes have it to suspend the 3-touch rule for resolution 23-1927. I'd entertain a motion for passage of resolution 23-1927, authorizing the mayor to sign a service agreement with Pat's Trees and Landscape for 2023 to 2025 tree service.
I move resolution 23-1927, authorizing the mayor to sign a service agreement with Pat's Trees and Landscape for 2023-25 tree service.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any nays? The ayes have it. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Director Perico. This is important work. Item 11, council discussion and action. Councilmember Bodie is going to be talking with us about the amended letter to Sound Transit regarding the impacts of the PRO's business access and transit BIT lanes that we discussed previously at the committee of the whole on Monday, which seems like a month ago.
It does. doesn't it?
Councilmember Bodie, please.
Yes, so I appreciate the excellent discussion and general support from our meeting on Monday. You will see highlighted in yellow the changes that were made in response to comments, plus one additional insert. So the first one is actually an additional insert based on some information. I've been diving deep into the technical information and trying to figure out what is the relative costs. And so I added the first insert in yellow, which says, as a result, Sound Transit is spending nearly 10 times as much per minute saved in LFP compared with the cost per minute of transit time saved on 145th Street. And so if we send this letter, the note to council comment would be deleted. But I wanted to provide that information as backup for the statement that I made. The second edit, it comes on the next page, and this is the retaining wall. So I did mash together suggested language from Councilmember Goldman, and I shortened it a little bit. So you can see that it has the city appreciating Sound Transit's collaboration and work on retaining wall design. But the retaining wall will still reflect and magnify noise impacts on these same homeowners. So I think that was the intent that folks were looking for. Addition number 7, I think, is a really excellent one from Councilmember Goldman about basically the loss of service in the Southern Gateway area. And I actually, it got me thinking. And I realized that that's where we have a lot of our affordable multiplex housing and potential affordability incentives and requirements. And so that will ripple over the years as there's fill-in of those structures. So anyway, I thought this was a very good addition to the letter, and something that hasn't, I know Councilmember Goldman has brought it up, but I think it's, it requires constant repeating along with our other points. So because it's a transit impact, so anyway, I really appreciate that one. Councilmember Goldman gave me some proposed language on the idea of side-by-side comparison information. That right now I've confirmed that that's not intended to be done. They think they have provided sufficient information on and basically a statement that the project team, the board, and the CEO all support moving ahead. So I think that this information would be very helpful to get things going. What I did was I took language from Councilmember Goldman, and then I broke out a number of items that occurred to me would be reasonable to see information on. So I'm open to changes in that list. And then the last sentence is really an excellent one from Councilmember Goldman about we really need to see this information. It's important. And then last but not least, the last sentence that's added at the bottom of the page is the impact on our many dozens of private residences, which makes a difference in deciding between whether you do queue jumps or a BAT lane. But also in talking with a community engineer and some other folks, I've been learning more, and it really is at the signal lights, of course, that you would get the benefit of the queue bypass or queue jumps. And what the engineer in question, who doesn't want to be named because of his job and where he works, indicated to me that really the place where you would get the most valuable queue jump would be at 153rd. That when you make the turn, you're okay till you hit 153rd. And that would be a significant queue jump. And then by the time you get to 165th, you really only need a little bit of a jump because you have the bus stop right there. And then by the time you get to 170th, there's a BAT already. And so if you break it down like that, it makes a lot of sense. And so I will just say, separate from this, I've encouraged this anonymous person to see if they could map out a conceptual plan and share that with us. So hopefully it doesn't affect this letter. I just wanted to share that information and the reference to the traffic lights. That's why that's in there. So
Thank you, Councilman.
so that's it. I think those are responsive to the comments that we got, and I'd welcome any discussion, and our goal would be to adopt this by vote of the council tonight, and then have it sent out under Deputy Mayor French's signature on behalf of the council.
Thank you, Councilmember Bodie. Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As many of you know, I am a Sound Transit employee, and I will recuse myself from discussion and action on these items. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Furtani.
And thank you, Councilmember Bodie, for drafting the letter. It's the improvements are amazing. So I think this will be very effective. Now, just to make sure, because we got burned on this before at that Sound Transit meeting, they know they use words sometimes in the way that we don't use words. So as we learned with the phrase queue bypass and queue jump. So by saying, let's see, the bat lane and queue bypass and signalized lights, they will know that we mean essentially that the lights are timed in such a way that the buses get priority over other traffic at that light.
I do believe so. That has been, I started out with the wording of queue jumps, and I thought, having read the materials and the way terms were being used, that I should use queue bypass. And the signalized lights is a shorthand that's used for the lights to go for the bus light to go first, basically. And so I believe so, Councilmember Furtani.
Thank you.
But I have done my due diligence, but I can't say that I'm 100% sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Furtani. As an attendee at that meeting, I can say that I was surprised about, we definitely need some definitions of terms, and the Jedi mind trick, never one to fail to bring Star Wars into certain situations. Here we go. That was definitely something that was a little bit different for me. But I think I read this too. I think this language is what I've seen in other documents as well.
It does remind me of the public meeting at the elementary school. There was a discussion, and it just took me by surprise, because the discussion was, well, if we have queue jumps, it's not a BAT. Oh, it's not a BRT. It's rapid ride. And I was like, whoa. So there is a lot, it's like any field. There's a lot of jargon. I'm okay with rapid ride because, frankly, if we're not a BRT, we'd be not in transit oriented development. So, but that may be too much to ask.
Colleagues, what's your pleasure? Mr. Goldman.
Yeah, so thank you for incorporating those suggestions. I think it's a good letter. I do think we need to be more explicit. Something we heard from several community members at the LFP elementary meeting was that we want data to make an informed decision, and we haven't gotten it yet. This is going to sound a bit pedantic of me. I'm on Sound Transit. They have an FAQ that came out of the LFP elementary meeting, and they say, Q jumps are Q bypasses, but not all Q bypasses are Q jumps. Kind of like all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. Actually, they use that exact analogy. So I think Q jump is the more specific term, that a bat lane is one type of Q bypass. A Q jump is a second type of Q bypass. So I'm thinking we might actually want to go back to Q jump.
Okay,
If the meaning is the more specific, it's at the traffic light. I think Q jump would be the more accurate term.
I appreciate that, and I had not picked that up from the frequently asked questions, so I actually completely support that, that correction. And I'm sure we'll stand corrected. I think especially since that comes from Sound Transit, I was looking at other materials. So if that's a Sound Transit interpretation, then I think we should replace bypass wherever it exists with jump, because that's for a very compelling statement. What do others think? Do you agree with that from the reading that Councilmember Goldman did?
Did you? No.
Just a
Please.
new topic, so I wanted to.
I do agree with that, Mr. Goldman's interpretation and work on that. And I think that would be replacing bypass with jump wherever necessary. Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. Well, I'm in favor of most of this. I think the second paragraph where we're still sort of comparing ourselves to the other cities still concerns me and isn't something I can support. I firmly believe the other cities have gone through this already. And comparing our project to completed cities is not the tenor that I'm interested in providing. I think the rest of it is factually worth sharing, but I just want to make myself known for that piece.
I'm sorry, on point, paragraph 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Briefly, our city is the most heavily impacted community of the entire four city project.
Okay,
Dot, dot, dot.
thank you. Colleagues' thoughts on point, Councilmember Riddle's comment. I'm sorry, Mr. Goldman. I'm trying to catch my peripheral.
I'm just trying to think of ways to edit to address that, but I was just still thinking.
And I was going to try to get you some edits, but I have been swamped and I apologize. I did not get that to you in time for this evening's meetings.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, I personally, I would be comfortable removing that. I do understand Councilmember Riddle's point, and I think the rest of our request does stand on its own legs regardless, that we're asking for a cost benefit analysis about the different options. And regardless of how other cities are impacted, we should still have that cost benefit analysis. So I personally think the letter can still stand on its own even without that paragraph.
Could I for discussion purposes suggest we could say briefly, our city is heavily impacted by the project, period. Compared to the project as a whole, and then go into the this is really just a summary of the impacts in our city. So would that help you and address your concerns, Councilmember Riddle? Briefly, our city is heavily impacted by the project.
Yeah, and I mean, I would, if it would be, if we were to eliminate kind of that section, so briefly, our city is heavily impacted by the project. LFP's 1.2 mile span has 56% of the property takings and majority of, so I think kind of that just gets us to, and here's the data.
Yes, okay. So it would read just those two sentences. Briefly, our city is heavily impacted by the project, period. LFP's 1.2 mile span, ...
I think
Correct.
that would work.
Okay,
Kind of glancing over the rest, but.
colleagues,
Councilmember Goldman, would that be acceptable to you?
Yeah, that works for me.
And then I think the only thing I would add is that in contrast, I don't know if that's in contrast to the amount of impact or in contrast to the other communities. I wasn't sure. In contrast, transit benefits will be modest. I guess I'm thinking how that reads.
okay, yes, let's take out in contrast also. then it's just a
statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
So when I make the motion, I guess I have to read those edits I'll read that whole paragraph.
Please,
over.
that would be helpful.
As part
Yeah,
of
because I
the
can't
motion.
edit this on
Yes.
live, so colleagues, other thoughts on this? I think it's an excellent letter. Thank you very much, Councilmember Bodie, for taking the leadership in doing this. It expresses a lot of thoughts that we have, as well as I know a lot of community members have made these comments to us, and this aggregates a lot of them. Councilmember Bodie, what's your pleasure?
So I just wanted to mention one other point in my motion. I'd like to recommend that we adopt this with the changes that we authorize our deputy mayor to sign on behalf of the council. And that the third part that I hadn't mentioned is, I think because we want to get the word out to the community, that we would request the city to get the information on the letter out on social media and the website, including our Sound Transit website, but also on our notification system.
Okay.
What do others think about that? I do think the community will want to hear about this sooner rather than later because of the public interest in it. Is that okay? If that's part of the motion, or should we just keep that separate?
I think we should keep that separate from
Okay.
Mr. Lebo.
If it would be okay to the pleasure of the council that we list the council members that are signing as opposed to on behalf of all council members.
I would like to make sure that it reflects the fact that a majority of the council adopted it. I don't mind listing if the letter can say the council, and then I don't mind listing the council members' names.
Listing the council members that approve it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
I
okay,
think that's very reasonable.
yes,
John, thank you for that.
as long as the letter can still be on behalf of the council because of the vote. That was my thought, though you've recused yourself, but then it will be clear that you were not one of the voters if we list them on the signature block.
Thank you.
Councilmember Riddle.
And I'm struggling with signing on that the bat lane is like the right solution. I really feel like we hit the mark, which is prove that it isn't the right solution. That it is the more minimally invasive solution, if you will. But as an architect and a contractor, if you're going to rely on engineers, if they can't show that it's not viable, then it's probably the right solution. But if they can, I can't say, honestly, I'm not an engineer. I can't say it's the right transit solution for Bothaway. I just can't. I'm not the engineer who understands how queue jumps work.
Where are you? Councilmember?
Boy, I'm on the second page.
Yes.
The bolded paragraph. Right above the bolded paragraph. So there's item 8, and then at the end of that paragraph under item 8. I mean, I guess I don't know if it's the right transit solution for Bothell. I know it's the least impactful solution for Lake Forest Park, right? But do I have the ability to actually say, I believe it's.
So should we say the right transit solution for LFP?
But I don't know that. If it
Or
can't be
our
done, then it
community.
isn't the right one.
Oh, well.
I think it's perhaps the preferred or the least impactful solution, which I think we want the least impactful solution. That still serves the need of the system. So I mean, to me, that's just, I challenge that language just because I can't actually.
I know.
Walk
I'm
up to
just trying
someone
to
and say,
think
I
of a
know
way to
this.
say it.
I know you want to be kind of strong about it, but to
Yeah.
me, it's disingenuous for me to actually sign my name to, I believe this is, because I can't say that. I just know I want them to look into it. I want them to prove to us that it works or doesn't work. And, like any teacher, show your work, right? So we know what it is. And if the council is supports that, then I won't be signing on to this, and I'm okay with that if that happens to be the case.
Councilor Furtani.
On point, I was just wondering then, it's that last sentence in that paragraph. So would a phrase like, however, given current data.
Bingo. That's where I was
and then
going.
The rest of it.
That's where I was gonna
Oh,
go.
I like that.
Yeah.
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 Because then it emphasizes our need to,
Get
for
the
them to
information.
prove it up, actually,
Yeah.
rather than just say, we like it better.
Yeah, I think that would be fine, because
Yeah.
that is true.
What
Current
was
data.
that, given current data?
However, given current data,
Okay.
the council believes that the bat lane is not the right transit
Okay.
solution. That's fine with me.
Okay.
Great, thank you,
Councilmember
council
Golden.
member.
And I'm in agreement with Councilmember Riddle that this is something I've struggled with. Because from a purely transit perspective, bat lanes are better than queue jumps.
Exactly.
It's when you add in the other factors that
Right.
it's unclear. And
Fair enough. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think Sound Transit has the onus that they need to prove that bat lanes are justified. And if they refuse to do that, then they haven't made their case. But I still think I want them to show their work so that we can have an informed discussion about it. So I think that, yeah, I think that change kind of addresses that for me.
Any other thoughts? I want to be sensitive to staff time here. With that, Councilmember Bodie, do you want to?
Yes, I'd like to move that the council adopt or approve, I guess would be the better way to say it. This letter as a council letter, but with individual council members listed as who voted yes, listed as the signatories, and authorize our deputy mayor, Tom French, to sign on behalf of all of us with the following revisions. First, in the second paragraph, it would be rewritten to read, briefly, our city is heavily impacted by the project. And then LFP's 1.2 mile span has 56% of the project takings, ... up until in contrast, which would be deleted. Then that sentence would read, transit benefits will be modest, only about 2 minutes, only northeast bound and only at peak rush hour. The rest of the paragraph would stay, except the note to council would also be deleted. Q bypass, the word bypass would be replaced everywhere it occurs and replaced with the word jump. So it would say Q jump. Then on the second page, the first not numbered paragraph, in the last sentence, it would read, however, given current data, the council believes ...
Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those signify the authorization to sign and transmit this letter on behalf of the council members who have signed it, as well as the council, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? So the ayes have it with one
You-
recusal.
Yes.
I'm not an A.
Oh, I know.
I'm a
I just
recusal.
left it.
Yeah, he's
Have
recused
the
with one
recusal.
recusal.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Councilmember
Thank you
Bodie.
very much. I appreciate it. I know the details are challenging and important to get right. So appreciate all the comments and edits. And I will review the draft when it gets prepared. It should be on city letterhead. And when it gets prepared, I will review it to make sure all these edits are in.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Bodie. Moving on to the next. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry, on point, to address Councilmember Bodie's second point about the transmission of this letter simultaneously on the city
yes.
website and the social media. Is this an operational thing that we can direct city staff to do?
It makes it very simple.
It does make it very simple.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember, for turning. I guess I'm getting a little threadbare and losing track of things. Thank you very much for that. So on to the next letter, which there are no changes that have been recommended other than, I think for consistency, let's just approach the signature portion of this in the same manner. Listening to council members that agree with it, and just putting on my policy hat for a second, or I can actually, I would just entertain a motion to adopt. authorize.
I move to authorize and
Whatever the word is, I'm not sure.
the letter to the CEO of Sound Transit regarding speed limits as drafted for approval by the council, but with the signatures to reflect the council members who have voted in support of it.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you. There's one abstention. The ayes have it.
Recusal.
I mean,
Recusal.
recusal, sorry. I need to write that down. One recusal. I apologize, Mr. Lebo. Thank you very much, colleagues. We'll get these sent off as well. This one I would like to see if we could please also get this posted to the mix. All right, with that, goodness, I think is there any other business? Okay, and then we have council committee reports. We had a committee of the whole meeting on Monday, so we don't really need to update that. If the public would like to take a look at that, that is on video, and there will be meeting minutes as well coming up. Council member reports. Don't all speak at once. Mr. Goldman.
It's late, so I'll try to be brief. I attended the Racer Principal Assembly along with City Administrator Hill. We got an update on how things are going, that it's almost fully staffed, I think bar one position. And in fact, there might be some grant funding from WASPIC for additional positions, at least temporarily. And so things seem to be going well. One area of concern was that it seems like we actually are on the advantage on this one, that Racer seems to be interfacing better with cities that have their own police departments compared to cities that use King County sheriffs. So that's that's good for us at the very least. Kenmore in particular seems to have a disproportionately low share of navigators. Also, there's going to be some budget questions. It's possible there might be a surplus, and so the executive board is going to be debating about what they want to do with that surplus, whether they might credit it back or give it back to the cities, or credit it against future dues, or invest it in a reserve account. And so we'll be coming back with that probably early next year. But otherwise, Racer seems to be going well. And also they really want to interface with the new crisis center. And in particular, one of their big asks was that they want to make sure the Racer navigators are treated as first responders, treated the same as police officers, paramedics, fire, and that they have the ability to bring people basically through that backdoor entrance if need be. Administrator Hill, did you want to add anything on?
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, anybody else, any other Councilmember Riddle?
I had the pleasure of attending a concert at Shoreline Community College over the weekend. It was a flamenco concert hosted by Shoreline Community College for the Spanish consulate, bringing in the winner of the flamenco contest that was in Spain back in April, May. It was fantastic, and it was a wonderful opportunity. And I had a quick conversation with their president, Jack Kahn, and he really sees himself as being a more local president for the college and being more connected with the local communities, including Lake Forest Park. So I see that as a good sign. And so building that relationship with them that I don't think we quite had with previous presidents is going to be nice for our community. And then I was able to attend a portion of the Lakefront community workshop. And it appeared to me to be very well attended. There were sticky dots, but they were clearish, so they were different. You could see through them. No, I think the community really responded well to the presentation or the material that the consultants put on. I hope they got great data. And as I understand it, they'll do a presentation perhaps, I think at our next business meeting is when I think we can hear some feedback from them on what they heard. So that was wonderful. And that's all I got at the moment.
Thank you. Any other council member reports? Yeah, I think pretty much everybody attended the lakefront property
At some point.
session. Was really very productive. Lots of good spirits there. Everybody was having a great conversation. It was really enjoyable.
I
Uh,
heard some people say they didn't put extra sticky dots because they just agreed with what other people had done, which
Ditto.
I thought was for a meeting like that, a very good comment.
I don't have anything really to add other than I would just wanted to say comment about wildlife. I was driving up by Horizon View, came up near the NUD site where the big green belt is, and saw a motion off out of the corner of my eye and was kicked. The front of my car was kicked by a deer as it jumped, as I slammed on the brakes, going down into that ravine. And they're out. I saw them down on the trail the other day too. So it's pretty fascinating. Hopefully we don't have any deer strikes. And with that, Mr. Hill, City Administrator's report.
Except I'd say once again, the police incidents are numerous and serious. So I did notice that again. There's never a report where you don't read them and go, wow, there's some serious stuff happening that our police department's dealing with.
Yeah.
So thank you, Chief, to you and your team.
Councilmember Riddle.
And just a note for those that might take this by surprise, we're gonna have freezing temperatures in the next few nights. So for those that don't have their insulation on their outside spigots, this is the night to do it because it's gonna get chilly tonight and get a little colder in the next couple nights. So took me by surprise when I looked at the weather report. So I thought I'd mention.
31.
Yep.
Well, on that happy note, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we're adjourned. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you. Good job, Tom.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all. Good discussion.
Thank you for the